Hello, my name's John. It's Mordheim Month. These are some of the starting gangs from the game, and you're watching Wargames, Models, and Other Hobbies. Hello and welcome back to another Mordheim Month video. Today we're going to be taking a look at each of the warbands that you can get with the game and a few miniatures that go with them. Rather than looking at all of the stats and everything like that, I'm just going to have a quick run through of their overview for each of the models. If you want to see their stats and things like that, you can take a look at the rulebook that I uploaded. At the end of the video as well, I'm going to put a nice high definition version of the gang roster, so if you want to take a screenshot so you can start creating your gangs, it's something that you can do. So, to start with, let's have a look at the Cult of the Possessed. The Possessed, the Damned, the Bogeymen. These scum are the worst of the worst. They are dangerous creatures, perhaps more so than any other group in the entire city. These chaos-worshipping scum consists of mutants, beastmen and cultists, and even worse things called the Possessed. If you ever let them get close to you, you'll be in big trouble. There are few who are a match for these scum in close quarters. So here we have some of the original models of the Cult of the Possessed. This is a Magister. Let's zoom on in so you can see it a little bit better. So this is a Magister. This was the leader of the Warbands. And this particular one is armed with a sword in the scabbard on his belt, an axe, a little kind of totem with a decapitated skull on there. And then we also have two of the Brethren, which were the basic troop type. These are kind of like a matching pair, each armed with an axe and a club. Back then there wasn't much choice in what you could use for Chaos Cultists, but now there is a great kind of diversity that you can play around with if you want to create a cultist gang. Some of the other great models in that were Possessed and that kind of thing, which were kind of really large models themselves. So let's go on to the next gang. The Undead. The restless dead plague Mordheim. Zombies, ghouls and huge hellhounds prowl the streets, and woe to anyone caught by them. He'll be eaten alive, or end up as one of the walking corpses himself. I lost my eye to one of the fanged horrors who leads the undead. Let me tell you, that thing was not human. I put my sword through it and it still kept coming. So the Undead. These were an interesting gang. They were led by a vampire. So here we have one of the original vampire models. Quite a traditional looking vampire, this one. They weren't the kind of the high-end vampires that you'd see in Warhammer Fantasy battles leading armies. These were just smaller, lesser vampires, but still really kind of a strong enemy or a strong person to fight as within the game itself. So that was the leader for each of the undead warbands. You also had the option to have a necromancer, and this is the little Mordheim necromancer, one of my favourite models. Very diminutive little old man holding a skull and a sword. But that was one of those original models. You could also have zombies, ghouls and direwolves, but a really interesting option were the dregs. So these were human survivors of Mordheim that had been kind of they deformed and rejected by people. I'm lucky enough to have some in a blister pack still, which I will be opening soon to start an undead gang. But as you can see, if I hold that close, we've got like hunchbacks. They look quite kind of grotesque as human characters. So the next gang, Witch Hunters. Witch Hunters will burn you and your warband if you give them the slightest reason. They are well armed and equipped, and show no mercy to anyone who dares to stand in their way. They are followed everywhere in Mordheim by a rabble of fanatics and those crazed flagellants. One word from a witch hunter and they'll tear you apart, burn you, decapitate you, and excommunicate you from the grace of Sigmar. Now, the witch hunters were one of my personal favourite warbands back in the day. I still have a few of the models and will be making a new warband soon. They are led by witch hunter captains and have witch hunters in them. This particular one is armed with a sword, a pistol, and a burning torch. So you could have quite a few of these in your gang, 3 witch hunters and a captain. There was also the option to have warrior priests. This was the Mordheim warrior priest, armed with a warhammer, flaming staff, and again, really nice characterful model, this one. All of the witch hunter models were really kind of, they had that essence of Warhammer in the day and that kind of quirkiness. There were the flagellants, where you can have a few of those in the gang. Generally, they were in the witch hunter gang, very kind of hairy, large weapons, very different from some of the ones you see later on in Warhammer. Also, you start to see some of the unique details on the witch hunters. In this case, we've got fish tied to the belt of this character. We then had the zealots, which were some of my favourite models of the time. So here we have one of the zealots holding a club and a fish. And these were the kind of general kind of fighters in one of the witch hunter warbands. So there is one of them. And then my particular favourite was the zealot with a little skeletal priestly hand puppet and an axe. Really unique style of models, and some of the ones that stood out for me when Mordheim first came out. Next on our list, we have the human warbands. Now, there were 3 in the original game. Let's listen to what the rulebook had to say about all of them. So, starting with the Middenheimers, these northerners are nutters, madmen, berserkers. They are as strong as an ogre and meaner than orcs. Watch out for them in close quarters. The chances are they'll crush your skull with a hammer or behead you with one of those hefty axes they carry around with them. We also had the Reiklanders. Reiklanders, the finest of men. Disciplined, magnificent archers and good solid warriors. Reiklanders need the best leaders, so you'd better shape up, boy. For these warriors are good at almost all the skills of war, and they are more likely to hold their nerve than any others in Mordheim. And finally, we've got the Marienburgers. The rich boys of Marienburg. Never turn your back on them. I'll grant them this. They're completely ruthless and have more money than anyone else. Hardly surprising, as those fat leeches in the Merchants Guild fill their coffers. That's why they have such good armour and weapons, and usually a few more men than most as well. Don't let their fancy clothes and flash jewellery fool you though. They're not wearing those weapons just for show. They know how to use them as well. So, the human warbands in Mordheim. They're the 3 types originally. All of them can be represented by the plastic models that came with the set. Here are 2 of them that I've made for a warband. We can see here we've got a guy with a little helmet on and a crossbow with his trench coat, and the second helmet, sword, as well as holding a lantern from one of the accessory sprues. You could kind of kit them out particular ways to show what type of warband they were, whether they're Middelheimers, Reiklanders or Marienburgs. You also had the metal models with them. So here we have a Reikland captain. So this guy's got a crossbow on his back, a buckler, a sword, all dressed in armour. There were a few of these in different variations. We then have one of the Marienburg troops. These were quite distinctive as they had kind of feathery hats. They looked a little bit kind of upper class compared to the other ones. So this one's got a dagger and a sword, and some kit on their belt. We then have one of my favourite models from Mordheim, and that is one of the Mordheim Youngbloods, and it's one of the few outside of the Sisters of Sigmar, a female character, and this one is armed with dual hammers. Just looks very vicious with a wolf pelt on the back, flowing hair. Really love this model and could imagine how vicious it could be in close combat. Our next warband is the Sisters of Sigmar. Don't believe anything those witch hunters say about the Sisters. They're no more heretics than I am, and I'll skewer any man who says different. Not that the Sisters need looking after, they're mean fighters, and you got to be tough just to live like they do in the big fortress in the middle of Mordheim. So the Sisters of Sigmar, they live in a big fortress in the middle of Mordheim. They were there before the meteor struck, and they hid in their keep, where they then venture out after to deal damage to all the unbelievers and the sinners and that kind of thing. Here are a few of the models from the original release. This is the matriarch, one of the leaders of the warbands. You can see they have quite a monastic look to them, similar to Sisters of Battle, but obviously without the guns. They tend to be armed with large hammers, so you can see with this one a two-handed warhammer. There are then a variety of different characters within the gang. So this is one of the Sister Superiors, one of the more advanced members, wielding two warhammers. So really quite a nice model, that one. And then here we have just some Sigmarite Sisters, the standard kind of unit within the gang itself. They could represent novices as well, but you can see there's that theme going throughout with either the armour or just the robes and that kind of thing. We then have the Skaven. These are no ordinary vermin, big as a man, fast on their feet and smart too. Not like common rats, the whole city's full of them, and worst of it is they're waiting in the old drains and sewers, watching for a chance to catch you on your own. Let 'em and you're a dead man. So the Skaven. I've got a few models to show you right now. I will be making a gang in a later video, but I have some of the metal models here. This first one is the Rat Ogre that you can include in your gang. You can only have one of these, but they're quite effective to terrorise the other gangs. Compared to the other Rat Ogres that were out at the time, I have to admit this isn't my favourite model. It kind of seems very top heavy, and the legs don't quite seem to kind of have the right look in my mind, but it doesn't matter because there are lots of different variations of the Rat Ogre now that if you want to do a Skaven gang, you can choose to use a different model altogether. I also have here two blister packs still with the characters in. So we have here one of the Black Skaven, which was the kind of second in command. This one is armed with a warp-lock pistol and a sword. And I will get these out of the cases when I make the warband in a later video. And then we then have some Night Runners, who are the kind of the young bloods, the up-and-comers within the gang itself. And both of these are armed similarly with dagger and sword. And I'll get those out of there when I make the gang again. So before we finish up, we're going to have a look in the rulebook at some of the different imagery of the models that were available back then, just to give you an idea of them. So we have here on the inside cover, there are the Sisters of Sigmar fighting Skaven. We then have some Reeklanders, a fantastic converted model there. We then have some Middenheimers against some zombies from the undead. You can see a vampire there, and necromancer. On the back cover, we have a few other models. So here we have a necromancer from Warhammer Quest, one of the Skaven models, a Sisters of Sigmar model, and then we've got some of the plastic humans and plastic Skaven. that classic Mordheim female young blood attacking some zombies, and then a few other characters there. Skaven, that noble there is from Warhammer Quest. Then we have some zombies attacking Skaven there. Now in the middle of the book, which you don't get on the digital version, is a whole colour section which lets you go through and see how to paint and make them, but we do have a few pages with more detailed images of all of the guys fighting. So here we have Reiklanders against the Skaven. We then have, looks like Skaven winning against the Sisters of Battle in that one. Some Mordheimers from the plastic kit that you get with the game. Undead and Mordheimers in the middle of a fight. There we have some Marenburgers against some ghouls. There is a vampire about to take out a Reiklander Youngblood. We have some Skaven. More Sisters of Sigmar against Skaven there. And then here, another Sister of Sigmar against Skaven. We have what looks like two human gangs facing up to each other, whether that's Reiklanders and Mordheimers or Marenburgers and Mordheimers. Not really sure on that one. And then we have Undead versus Reiklanders there. And then now we've got some very specific bits on the warbands themselves that show some of the models. So there are the Marenburg mercenaries. They're fantastic models, those ones, really nice. There we have some of the Reiklanders. Some of the models they show in here are from Warhammer Fantasy Battles as well. It was great to be able to interchange all of those models. So here we have Undead versus Marenburg, some Reiklanders. Then again there we have Mordheim Warband. There's some fantastic little conversions of some Kislev Warband. There is the character pit fighter that you can have. And then more humans. There's a converted possessed gang. We have Sisters of Sigmar there. There's some witch hunters. And as you can see, this goes on and on through the middle of the book. If you'd like to see these in more detail, please let me know and I'll put a bonus video with all of these on. But as you can see, we've got lots of imagery here of all of those different warbands that you can play as. So, I hope you've enjoyed this video looking at the different warbands from Mordheim. Like I said, at the end of the video, I'm going to put a nice quality still of the roster up so you can take a screenshot if you want to, so you can start creating your own gangs. But for now, I'd just like to say thank you so much for tuning in. My name's John, and you've been watching War Games, Models, and Other Hobbies.